All right, well, welcome everybody while I get the slides going here. Any guests in the room? Or is everyone with us? We got one here? All right, well, welcome. What's your name one more time? Raphael, welcome to our office. For those who don't know, which I know everyone in this room basically, but I'm Joe. Delia, come on. And I'm about to break my computer. My Surface battery is like dying on me. So when I don't have it plugged in.
I know we have at least probably 250 or 350, right? We got a couple. There's one coming up in Roseville that's close to that.
The one
Is that the one where?
we're gonna flip?
Yeah, is that what we're doing?
I came across another one today. We might have like 3 flips going, so it's kind of nice.
It's going to sell to the agents in this office.
All right, I'm kind of tired of dealing with this, to be honest.
TV not turned on?
No, it is. It's my laptop.
Oh, there's you.
I'm just gonna unplug that and see what happens. Does it just die on me?
Buy the paper and then flip the paper.
There he is. He wore your Lions gear. I like it. Welcome.
Checks out.
Look at it. We've got handout there, James. Right there. James, you should be teaching this one. All right. So this is a section out of a class called Quantum Leap. Quantum Leap is basically a course. It's funny. Sitting in the room with Gary Keller for 8 years, you learn how some of this material comes together. And I don't mean that from like an arrogant perspective. It's just the truth. Sit in the room with Gary for the last 8 years, you start to learn how some of this material came together. All right. Well, I don't know why this isn't. My laptop like died between the office and here, so everyone's got their printout, and I'll just see what happens with this in a minute. Okay, so go to so this was this whole course, and this is the 4th section of the course was, and I think Josh, you were there when he taught it at Family Union the one year, remember, right? So this 4th section is all about financial productivity, and his whole basis of why he created Quantum Leap was almost like an instruction manual to his son of best practices, John. Right, so Gary and I forget his wife's name, but they only have John only. They have John as their only child, and he wanted, if something was to happen to him, to almost have like a best practices instruction manual to his son to how to succeed in life at the highest level, right? And this is the finance portion of it. And I think this material is absolutely fantastic. Some of the stuff that's led up to this 4th chapter, you'll have in here, and I'll add some depth to that because without going through section 1, section 2, section 3, which we did do a piece of it previously. I forgot what class that was. There was kind of a lead up to it. Okay, so flip to page 121 here. Who wants to read this first section? Carter, you seem excited. Why don't you go with that first part there?
Finance the material foundation necessary for you to achieve your personal mission for your life.
Okay, so to finance the material foundation necessary for you to achieve your personal mission for your life. So what would be a prerequisite in order to achieve something like this? What would you need? You would need a personal mission, right? Who here can articulate their personal mission at a high level? Okay, homework item number 1, right? And I would recommend start with core values, right? So who's heard me talk about how to figure out core values previously in a quick way? I hired a consultant for $2,000 once to do this, and you guys get it for just selling one more house. Go ahead, Emily.
Figure out everything you're not.
Yeah. So the shortcut is write down together, and this is a great exercise to do if you're in a relationship with someone else. Also, is figure out what you're not first, because people have a hard time articulating what they are. right? They might say trustworthy, they might say these things, but when you really start to get deep into conversation, it's real easy for people to say, well, I'm not a liar, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this. And then usually the opposite of whatever they state they're not is usually what they are. Does that make sense? And it's something to reflect on. And what you'll find is a lot of synonyms. And so then you try to find a way in which to organize those. For us on the Delia group, we created the culture mnemonic, right? And that's committed, united, learning-based, trustworthy, unique, relentless, empowered, right? And that's who basically Renee and I were as people. So that's what became kind of our business core values. Does that make sense? Right? And then off of your core values really helps you, start to develop into your personal mission. And mine, frankly, and I'm living it right now, is to raise the financial acumen of the people around me. Because I think it's very few spaces that really spend much time raising people's financial acumen. Right? In school, we don't talk about it. Our parents and our relatives all say, oh, money's the root of all evil, which is one of the craziest statements you can make. Evil's the root of all evil, or the lack of money, right? Because how many times people do stuff as a result of lack of money. And even people that have money do evil things, right? So you can't say money's the root of all evil. That makes no sense. You could say power maybe, right? Those sort of things. But money being the root of all evil is crazy. But you'll hear other people that don't have any money repeat that same line, right? And I think that's a mistake, and we need to change these things. Right, who wants to read this second section? Oh, and one other thing about personal mission, sorry. When you first start on this, and I taught this in business planning in Brighton, when you first start thinking about this, a lot of people want to make it about other people. Oh, it's for my kids, it's for my spouse, it's for these things. Realize the only person who's with you all day long is yourself, right? And so the only thing you can ever really count on through your entire life is yourself. 50% of marriages end up in divorce, right? And I'm not trying to project or wish anything upon anyone, but when you build your personal mission hinging on something that's out of your control, you're setting yourself up for some point having some type of crisis, right, in some way. So what I would encourage you to do as you work your way through whatever your personal mission is really go internal and figure out what drives you. And mine used to be about everything other than me, when in reality, I finally came to the conclusion that simply finding out what's possible and raising the financial acumen of the people around me are absolutely what drives me every day. And finding out what possible is just like, where can this thing go if I just put a solid effort in on a consistent basis towards it? Where do we end up? And whatever that result is, that result is. I was talking to Lewis, my son, about this yesterday. I go, don't worry about what you scored on the xylophone test or whatever thing they were testing on at school. I go, if you put the preparation in and you put your full effort, the result's going to be the result. Don't worry about the result. Worry about what you can control. You can't control the result. You only can control how you show up. Does that make sense? Chris earlier said something. He's not in here, but he said something like, oh, it's the day before the holiday. I go, winners always figure it out, right? Winners will figure out how to show up at class. You know what I mean? Other people will figure out the reason not to, right? At the end of the day, they can control how they show up. And I had someone say, oh, well, I've got a closing. I'm like, well, what if you treated the class like a closing? Right? This class could yield a lot more in your life than what that closing does. Just put the closing a couple hours earlier, a couple hours later. You know what I mean? And I realize sometimes there's stuff out of your control, but at the end of the day, if that's the mentality you approach it with, usually the world has a way of figuring it out. Okay, Jonathan, you want to go with a financially wealthy person?
Yeah, someone who has accumulated the wealth that delivers the unearned income, passive, necessary to become self-actualized and achieve their personal life mission.
Again, right? In order to become financially wealthy, we have to have what? Well, we have to have passive income. What else?
Personal life mission.
Personal life mission. And I can tell you, as someone who's made a lot of money and as someone who's made very little money on any given year, if you make it about money, you will eventually achieve that if you show up every day and you work hard. And then you'll again be in a midlife crisis, right? Or at some point, it could be a late life, early life crisis. Because when you're chasing a number and you hit it, what Ed Mylett talks about all the time is depth perception, right? You have a depth perception issue. Everyone in this room thinks financial freedom's a lot further than it actually is. And you can get there if you show up for time on task over time consistency. You will 100% hit the number. And once you get there, you'll like, well, shoot, do I chase a bigger number? Like, what do I do? Because I'm kind of here. But if you had a personal life mission, like raising the financial acumen of the people around you or what's possible, right? You would continue on that path because you're trying to explore what's possible. Does that make sense? So, and then passive income. Why would passive income be important? There's a lot of people that can run up the scoreboard on earned income. Do we understand the difference? right? Earned income is what we show up to do every day. Passive income shows up regardless of whether we show up, right? Or at least as close to as possible. Why would we want it to be passive?
Trading time for money.
Yep, that's one of them. What else?
It gives you more time to work on your personal life mission. If it's passive, then you're not having to focus on that. You can focus on your life mission.
I agree with that.
Still making money.
I agree with that. Anyone else?
Compounded growth. Compounded growth.
On growth. I think it also gives you like this almost relief that you no longer have to live by short-term ideals and goals, right? Like you're able to turn your profession into your hobby. And if you're able to turn your profession into your hobby because you're financially free off to the side, like let's look at Gary, for instance, right? Keller Williams is at this point his hobby. I mean, the guy put $150,000 in the porch and sold it for $200 million. Right? I mean, I realize that's not passive, but it's certainly a lot of money, right? He also has a ton of passive investments. So he chooses to show up to Keller Williams because it's his life mission to improve the people around him. The guy doesn't need to, you know what I mean? He chooses to, right? And there's a lot of power in that because when you get into these, I remember I was sitting with him, and it was literally you to me, James, right? And I asked him a question, I forget what it was, and he goes, well, I've always hedged with investment real estate, so if Keller Williams goes away, I'm still good. And I'm like, wait a minute, right? You're talking about a multi-billion-dollar company, and if it goes away, like you're kind of just shrugging it off. Well, that's because he knows his lifestyle doesn't have to change at all because he has enough passive income at this point that it doesn't matter. He shows up because he wants to. Does that make sense? You guys with me on that? And that's why and I'll just say one other thing on this topic. You never know how much money you need, right? And Ben Kenny used to talk about this all the time. And it's, hey, do you have a check if your parents or your cousin or someone you care about comes to you and says, hey, I need $100,000 for this life-saving emergency surgery, and if I don't get this, I'm dead, right? Do you have that type of, where you could stroke that check and not think twice about it? If not, then maybe you should continue to pursue what your potential is. Does that make sense? Continue to pursue what your potential is within the framework of time that you've chose to allot for it. That doesn't mean cheat with time and work till, midnight every single night, but put a parameter on it, go at it 100% while you're there, attack it with intensity, which Jim Harbaugh say, an enthusiasm unknown to mankind. Go blue. Right? An enthusiasm unknown to mankind. And then move on to your next thing, what you do for the rest of the day. Does that make sense? Everyone with me on there? And cash flow and wealth are not the same thing. There's a lot of people in this world that have very sexy spreadsheets with a big number at the end, but they still got to show up every day to pay today's bills. We've got this land listing and that we're working on in Ann Arbor, and I won't give where it actually is, but and it's $500,000. And I told Renee, if we had like who cares money, that'd be a great spot to plant $500,000 because that thing's not going down. I mean, there's skyscrapers going up all over the place around there. There's five lots in that district. Only 2 of them are privately owned. The other 3 are owned by the city. Right, so everything else has been developed. I'm like, I mean, that would be great, like speculation money at some point, right? But I don't have $500,000 I want to pull off the table to put it on speculation at this point, right?
Why wouldn't you do like a land contract, like put or at least put an offer out?
Could land contract it, but then I'm going to move further negative on cash flow than positive, right? So my whole game is chasing to get as financially free as quickly as possible. And then at that point, use the excess to go and do stuff like that. And you could do that, James. Someone who wants to go and pursue that, like that could be a piece of it. Yeah, someone absolutely could do that, right? And there's nothing wrong with choosing to do that. Our personal choice is we're chasing cash flow, right? We want to chase things that positively cash flow. And that may mean that property, by the time, if we did the deal like James was talking about, a land contract, 5, 10, 15 years from now, it could be a $2 million piece of property and we would have left that money on the table, right? I mean, that's certainly a possibility, right? But if you've become financially free, it doesn't actually really matter, right? Because you already have the money that you need. That just makes the spreadsheet even sexier for your kids.
I've got a
Go ahead.
client right now, said his goal is to have all of his investments, rental properties, make him $397 a day total. Once he hits that number, he's at like 165 right now.
Yeah.
We're working on obtaining like more stuff, and he's starting to do stuff in Florida now. But he's like, that's my goal. He's like 48. He's been
Yeah.
for 20 years.
Well, and you have to have a plan in order to know that number, and then you have to work the plan,
But
right?
he worked hard.
Most people never create the plan, and then they don't know what they're chasing. right? So it starts with first knowing where you want to go, which is, again, personal life mission. So I could spend all day, the whole hour on this one. But just to finalize, wealth without cash flow won't finance anything, right? So realize assets are great, cash flow is even better. And cash flowing assets are ideal, absolutely ideal. All right, who wants to read the truth?
The most common mistake we make in life is looking outside of ourselves for what we should find inside.
Right? We have a bold law sitting up there, and it says, don't compare your insides to other people's outsides, right? In the advent of social media, everyone looks like they're living their best life because you're looking at everyone's highlight reel or what they're presenting as a highlight reel, right? In reality, it looks nothing like that, right? We all know that, but it causes us to stop and think, I'm not good enough, right? And you start circling through all of your insecurities as a result of viewing these things. I'm so glad we don't have that. We didn't have social media when I was a teenager. But even like I found it through periods of even when I've had high success where I'm like, man, look what Ben Kenny's doing. Man, look what Tim Hiles doing, right? And I'm comparing my insides to their outsides. And then I thought about it. And this isn't a shot when I say this. I'm like, oh, Ben's a single guy with no kids and no wife and no girlfriend, right? And that doesn't make him better or worse, but it's certainly he's living a different set of rules. And we all are, right? We all are. And kudos to him for all the success he's seen. But why do I give a shit what he's doing if I'm financially free, right? So I found myself, and thank God for the bold laws, because I caught myself in that process and didn't spiral out of control as a result mentally, comparing my insides to other people's outsides. I actually got into this, and I said I talked to Gary about it. I don't know, Emily, you might have been in the room at the time, but were you there when I was talking to him about Lamborghini guy? No. So I said, hey, listen, I'm competing with Lamborghini guy in our market, right? And I'm like, I certainly could go buy a Lamborghini if I wanted to. It would set back everything I just got done talking about. But like, I'm not Lamborghini guy. And he goes, well, are the agents you're pursuing and the agents you're interested in being in business with, are they also wanting to be Lamborghini guy? And I said, no, like that's not our target market. Our target market is people that want to show up in this class, in my opinion, and build really big businesses. And he goes, well, then don't worry about it because those aren't your agents, right? And so don't look at what other people are doing and compare yourself to that. Figure out your own plan and what you want to go and achieve, and then measure against that consistently. And as long as you're achieving that, that's all that matters at the end of the day. Because everyone else is playing by a completely different set of rules than what you play by, right? They had different parents, they grew up in a different community, they have access to different resources. All those things are different for them. All you can control, again, going back to personal life mission, is what you can do, which is why you need to find it inside what you want to do. And it plays into, again, the personal life mission. But I said earlier, you have to look inside before going outside, right? And if you ever read the One Thing book, they talk about when you put the man together, the world fell into place. That you got to get yourself right, and then you can get everything right around you. Okay? Who wants to read a greater truth?
Success is no exception. Just as the source of true happiness lies within each of us, success also comes from within. Success is the result of a very specific mental attitude.
What's your take on that? Success is a result of a very specific mental attitude. Who's got something to say on that?
Kind of living it right now, to be honest with you. I've noticed that I was going to bed at night, even though everyone around me was satisfied, my tasks were completed, I was like empty inside. I didn't understand why. And it was just not taking care of that inside personal and understanding exactly where I wanted to be in life. So, I mean, I know you guys were part of the team, so you've seen it, but like since I've last 4 weeks and really changing mindset, attitude, mental approach every morning, every day, it's like I vibrate.
You're on the bell curve from the first time I talked to you to just the leaps and bounds growth you're on right now. You're on this trajectory, right? And it was slow and subtle, and then suddenly, boom, it clicked, and you were off, right? 100%. Any other thoughts on a very specific mental attitude?
Well, I think wanting success is one thing, but having the mental attitude to like really do what it takes, stay disciplined, focus is a completely another avenue, another aspect.
Yep, I agree with that. And I know I'm gonna beat this dead horse here, but I think it's understanding who you are. You know, a lot of people don't know who they are because they never like slowed down to ask themselves. They've never had a KPA validated. They've never gone and done that internal work. So when you haven't done your internal work, then it's really hard to like know what direction to go in. And I know I've already said that, so I won't say it a bunch of times. But and then once you've understood that, it's like you and I were having this conversation yesterday, Jonathan. I was like, listen, I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years, right? At this point, like I know I show up, I know my background, I know what I've been through, I know the resources I have. I know I'm going to work until it figures it out and it works. So it really doesn't matter. The market being down is actually a benefit to me because I know I have all of that to lean back on. Where everyone else who doesn't have that, they're going to be out of luck, right? And so, and I know I'm 8:30. I'm in that room just about every day, right? And if I'm not in that room, I'm in the room in Rochester, right? So I show up every day, put in solid day's work, and that'll put me ahead of just about everyone, right? Does that make sense? Right? And that's the mental attitude I have. I'm like, of course you have anxiety going into a declining market, but at the same time, everyone else is playing off that same market too. That makes sense? And I know the tools in our tool belt will lead to more success than people that have less tools, right? Who's the truth about wealth? Who wants to do this one? Katie, you're feeling frisky.
Call it what you like, the mentality of the rich, an attitude of success, or the prosperity consciousness. Financial wealth is the outward manifestation of an inner focus. It is the result of steering thoughts towards a specific financial target.
Yeah. So your guy's steering his thoughts towards what? No, your guy.
Oh.
What is your guy steering his thoughts? Calm down. What is your guy steering towards? Specific financial target, which was what?
300.
Right? So your example earlier is essentially exactly this. Does that make sense? Financial wealth is the outward manifestation of an inner focus, the result of steering thoughts towards a specific financial target, right? And so
set, like he knows what each property has
yeah,
to do.
and I mean this, and you guys, some of you have heard this before, but it boils down to Kristen always gets fired up because she shows up with her Starbucks every day, but and she's earned the right to do that, and that's her choice to do. But I call it $5 decisions, right? And there's certain levels to this game. If you don't make the right $5 decisions, then you don't get to make the right 50. Right? This is off the table for you. You don't get to make the right 500. There's a lot of people in this room. If I came to you and I said, "Hey, listen, you and I are going to make $5 million 5 years from now, but I need $100,000 from you right now." A lot of people don't get to say yes to that because they haven't made these correct decisions to level up to make that choice. Does that make sense? Right? So you got to make these right $5 choices in order to graduate into 50, 500, 5,000, 5 million. Does that make sense? Right? Some of you in this room, I could, right? Others, you're not there yet. You haven't graduated into that level, right? Who's got the bottom line? I'll do it. Genuine wealth is, above all, a state of mind, a mental state that has taken a physical form in the lives of the wealthy. You must begin by getting rich and wealthy in the mind before you can become financially rich and wealthy in life. Next. All right. So when you came into this room, I told you we would talk about fundamental truths and standards around money. The key to happiness is not more money. Happiness is happiness. Money is money. And who's read the One Thing book? So when do you find happiness? What did they talk about in the One Thing? I believe there's a whole chapter, at least a section of one. Happiness is found on the way to what? Was it the one you didn't know you're in for a One Thing quiz?
Figuring out your one thing.
Happiness is found on the way to fulfillment. Right? Happiness is found on the way to fulfillment. Have you ever met someone who is fully fulfilled and not happy? Kind of hard to do, right? It's like kind of hard to be grateful and angry at the same time. It's kind of hard to not be happy when you're fulfilled, right? Well, in order to achieve fulfillment, what do you need? What's a prerequisite? It's like, in order to go to the 202 class, you got to take the 101 class. What's the 101 class on fulfillment? We've beat the dead horse on it. Here's a hint. You need a personal mission. Because how can you be fulfilled on something when you don't even know what you're pursuing? Does that make sense? Right? So you got to have a personal life mission in order to become fulfilled. In order to become happy, you need fulfillment. Right? So that's the domino of these things. Right? Who's got number 2?
Whatever your life is about.
about, more money will amplify it. Money won't change you, it will expose you.
I put a lot of comments on that, but I think of money as a giant amplifier, right? It just amplifies who you are, and that doesn't. I've got friends that have like 17 AR-15s. Well, he didn't when he was poor. When he got money, he loves guns. He bought. I'm like, you only got 2 arms. You know what I mean? Like, I don't, and I love guns too, but I don't need 17 of them. Yeah. I just think of like Schwarzenegger or one of the action movies, right? Yeah. Right.
Strap that
I feel like
chain.
that's though, buy them
Yeah.
now what you can.
Yeah. Well,
That's precautionary.
that's a whole nother topic. But it'll expose you, right? Money at the end of the day exposes who you are, and it amplifies who you are. So whatever you were before you had money is who you are when you have money. You just now have the means to go and do all the things that you were pursuing, right? And you would have pursued when you didn't have it. So it's just an amplifier. It's like throwing a gas can in a fire, right? And then that's what ends up happening. You get amplified. Renee and I love real estate. So what do we do when we've had more money? Buy more real estate, right? We just love buying real estate. It's a passion of ours. What don't we care about? Suits, watches, cars. We don't care about any of that stuff. And that doesn't make anybody who likes that stuff bad. It's just an amplifier, right? It's just an amplifier, right? Okay, who's got number 3?
Lifestyle is style over amount, and style is an art, your personal art of living. You can't buy style with money. You can't buy good taste or good decisions with money. You can only buy more with more money.
Amen. Who's got number 4?
The life quest is to have the best life in the time available to us. It's not the amount, it's the value. Money doesn't buy value as it pertains to the best life possible.
Yeah, that's just put a stamp on this. Jim Rome. I look at today as the ability to like, and from now on, as long as we don't have another like humanity reset. If you look what we're able to look back as a result of text and as a result of video now, we can now hear the way highly successful people think as a result of writing and video. And we're able to learn from these things from people from thousands and thousands of years ago. And so one of the things Jim Rome talks about, who's passed away at this point, is he's like, people are like, oh, he died young. And it's like, well, what if the guy lived 3 lives in one, right? What if he really maximized his time? And on Instagram, I pinned a reel that talked about, oh, you didn't look at the price tag. And the price tag was the price tag of the television, right? It might have cost you $400, but how much did it cost you in terms of opportunity, right? And mind you, I'm wearing a Lions jersey. I'm not saying don't watch TV, right? What I am saying is put it in the proper place. Maybe on Saturday, instead of binging, a whole thing of, Real Housewives and experiencing all that drama through the process, maybe go and explore, the Path of Money YouTube, or listen to, one of the podcasts Gary does, or one of those things in order to help fulfill yourself forward. Last night, I had the pleasure of allowing my father-in-law to watch Elon Musk and who's the guy who was interviewing him, Lex Friedman, talk about for 3 hours on the podcast. It was riveting. It was for me. I don't know if he liked it, but I chose to do that instead of whatever else was on TV, right? And it wasn't 3 hours. It was just the last hour. Number 5.
Money will come to you when you are doing the right thing.
Anyone have a different experience? Anyone ever done all the right things and money not shown up? You think so? All the right things? I would argue that then you just haven't done enough time on task, right?
I think what I like about that is is that the right thing. What right things are those? Because if you're told your entire life, go to college, get a job, go into debt for college, go to college, you're gonna get a great career, you're gonna be able to, you're gonna be able to pay for everything with this career that you've gotten because you went and got a degree because you were told that you should get this degree and this is what you're told. That was what you were told, and you did the right thing. You were told that was the right thing, but
well, the right thing's subjective. They didn't. Whoever said that to you didn't do that out of Didn't say that out of not trying to guide you down the right path, right? So with the first know that, and second, they did believe that was the right thing, and for a lot of people it is, right? For a lot of people that is the case. You go, you get great grades, get a good paying job. You know, are you ever going to get rich? I don't know. Maybe if you do a really good job with the money you make and the delta between it. But really, entrepreneurship is where people make serious money, or entrepreneurship. I mean, the two things. Just about everything is some type of entrepreneurship. People claim entrepreneurship, but it's usually entrepreneurship, right? So, and if you continue to do the right things, the money will show up. Sometimes you got to go and make up for the choices that were right for other people, right? And you got to dig yourself out of that hole, right? But that is money showing up. You just don't have it in the bank. You have it in terms of net worth increasing because your debt's decreasing. So if you're measuring monthly and you're paying down debts, your net worth is going up. And a lot of people stay away from wanting to measure net worth because they don't want to see the number. They're most likely worth less than when they were born. And a lot of people are really uncomfortable with that reality. But the truth is, you got to know where you are in order to know where you want to go. And if you're not able to increase your lifestyle, then you're not getting any of those dopamine hits. So you have to manufacture them through having a monthly look at what your net worth's doing, so you know you're making progress. Right? Say you started $1 million in debt. I have a cousin who started $80,000 in debt from college, went to chiropractic school, got another $100 and some thousand in debt, opened up her chiropractic business, got another $100 and some thousand in debt, and then got knocked up by some random guy and now it doesn't work. Right? That's tough. That's tough. You know, that's a tough set of circumstances. One that I don't think she'll financially dig herself out of unless it's bankruptcy, right? So, however, if that was the case and you're $300,000, $400,000 in debt, you got to start somewhere, right? Again, what's the best way to eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So you just start chipping away, right? You chip away, and it's a Dave Ramsey, right? And then suddenly, boom, 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 it starts to domino up, right? What's truth number 6? Hint, it's right in front of you.
Money has its own rules and disciplines. If you don't learn them, you're basically financially illiterate.
Yeah, and a lot of those truths are what we just kind of went through here, and we'll hit on some of them. There's a lot of people that have money that are financially illiterate, but that money eventually parts from them. It does.
Did you listen to the last Lincoln podcast?
Nope.
Last week?
Mm-mm.
They finally agreed on, they were talking about, that's exactly what Gary says about it. He says, knowing the language of money is the language of adulthood. If you don't know how to read money, you don't know how to be adult.
Yeah, leave it to Gary to always be soft with the delivery. He doesn't mince words, man. It's like between the eyes. And in order to be that successful and to surround yourself with that amount of successful people, I actually texted Gwen this yesterday. I was like, she's like, she always hedges like saying, oh, my opinion doesn't matter in this. And I'm like, no. Like, you have to understand the more successful you become, the more people you surround you that tell you how smart you are. You need people that hit you between the eyes with the absolute truth, right? And because that becomes less and less around you, the more successful you become. So the people that are willing to give it to you candid, you actually really cherish that. That makes sense. So for Gary to lead a group like he does in that mastermind, you got to be blunt with people, right? And the truth is, he's way ahead of everybody, so he has the right to come back and kind of say. I remember Ben Kenny said he sent him an email with like 8 questions, and Gary's reply back was no. He's like, no. Anyways, 3 personal myths. I don't need to be an investor. My job will take care of my financial wealth. There you go, Lacey. Yes, you do need to be an investor. Your job is not your financial wealth, right? Why is that? Why is your job not your financial wealth? Huh? It's not passive, right? It's active. And again, nothing wrong with active income. You just got to be building passive on the side, right? Myth number 2, I don't want to need to be financially wealthy. I'm happy with what I have. You need to have open eyes. You do need and want to be financially wealthy. It doesn't matter if I want or need it. I just can't do it. You can't predict what you can and can't do until you try. Hence, to see what's possible, right? I don't know what's possible. I'm going to pursue it though, right? Who wants to hit this next packet? Next 2 or 3?
Myth, investing is complicated. Truth, investing is only as complicated as you make it. I think that speaks a lot to education.
Yeah. Well, those of us who are investing together, how hard has it been to run the math on our flips? Has that been like overly complex?
First time it maybe was.
First couple times, and then it got
Yeah.
second nature essentially.
But I mean, was there anything you couldn't do on your calculator? Like, did we need to get and I don't even remember what the Pythagorean theorem even like spits out anymore, but I know it's like a big, Renee knows, you know what I mean? But you know, once that's why I like real estate, it's napkin math. You and I literally could walk through a deal right now if we wanted to in the next 10 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, that's really good. I enjoy that. And there's nothing complicated about that. We're all realtors, right? So we should know what the after repair value is going to be, right? And maybe we don't know what repairs are going to cost, but I guarantee we would if we walk 5 GCs through, right? We'd find out quickly, right? So there's stuff we can figure out, and that's why you have the inspection period. All right, myth number 2.
The best investments require knowledge most people don't have. Truth, your best investments will always be in areas you can or already understand.
Who doesn't understand real estate in this room? Good news. How about number 3?
Investing is risky, I'll lose money. Truth, investing by definition is not risky.
Yeah, so let's do that real quick. Everyone look up what the definition of investing is. We all mutually agree that words matter. So let's see what the definition is. Whoever got it first, read it.
Definition of investing.
I know, I was going to do that.
Expend money with the expectation of achieving a profit or material result by putting it into financial plans, shares or property, or by using it to develop a commercial venture. Or
Yeah.
provide or endow someone or something with a particular quality or attribute.
Yeah, so is there anywhere in that definition that's risky? So we can't say investing in and of itself is risky. We all agree on that, right? I'll tell you, this property that we bought, our latest one we just bought last week, it was listed for $350. It's worth $350. We bought it for $290, right? If someone says, "Oh, the market comes down by 20%," which would be historically like catastrophic. Well, now we're even, right? Now we're even. And if you read the book Hold, what is the formula on buy and holds that you want to get on your entry? What's the percentage off of market rate? What's the minimum you're willing to do? 20 is my threshold. 30 is great for a flip, minus repairs. 10 is the one they have in hold, right? 10% off. I personally, I'm a financial wuss, right? Like, I don't like a lot of risk when it comes to finance, because I don't like going backwards. I like going forward financially. So I don't take on a lot of financial risk. Hence, James and I's conversation about that piece of property. Not that that's risky, but it just moves me negative cash flow. It's not risky at all. It is speculative. I want 20% off. It is some diversity. I agree with that. Okay, so does that make sense? We're good there? Okay. Successful investors are able to time the market. In successful investing, the timing finds you. Why is that? How does the timing find you in successful investing?
Fun. I think it's just when you have your formula that you can break down your numbers, as long as the deal is going to produce and not what you need it to, it doesn't really matter what time you're executing. It's I don't know if I'm going to have this right, but Gary had said, and you repeat this a lot, that you know, you don't time the market. You know, you just look at the numbers, and if it makes sense and it's a good business deal, you transact. Otherwise, you're going to get left behind.
First question I ever asked him, and he hit me with a baseball bat. He was kind of a dick. When I responded,
How do you time the market?
I said, "In this market, what's the best way to time it?" And he said, "I wrote a whole book on that. Why don't you read it?" And he goes, then he was nicer. I sat down and cried. I didn't actually cry, but it was the first question I ever asked him my whole life. And I was like, oh, I just got slaughtered. No, what he said was, I wrote a whole book on that. The truth is you don't time the market. It either meets your model or it doesn't. The market's irrelevant, right? Because we know the market does this, right? Well, actually it does this, right? So it's always over time going to go up, right? Do we all agree to that? I got on a soapbox with Emily about that earlier. She's supposed to be here. Over time, it always goes up. So when it meets your model, you buy. And if you're a long-term hold and you bought it, if its value is here and you bought it here, well, it can come back down and maybe it goes past it, but who cares? Because you're cash flowing at the end of the day. And all that it means if your values drop below what you purchased it for is you get to save on taxes, right? You get to save on taxes now, right? And then eventually it'll turn and go right back up, right? It always does. It has to, because the government has to inflate our currency. Therefore, hard assets have to go up over time, right?
Well, if it goes down, just buy more in dollar cost average.
That's the other part too.
More for less.
And that's where your active income comes into play, right? And as James just said, if the market comes down and you're making active income, then you dollar cost average across more houses using your active income to do it. Does that make sense? Okay. All good investments are taken. Every market has its share of good investments. Does anyone in this room believe that all the good investments are taken? Okay. You're on your way to being adults, according to Gary. 8 concepts of personal money management. As a rule, pay cash or cash equivalent, no plastic credit, right? And I get in trouble with my friends on this. I don't think you should finance luxury. Financing luxury to me is you just delay it until you have the opportunity to buy it cash. Because when everyone went out and bought $150,000, $200,000 boats, they thought that market was going to stick around. But they still have the boat and they still have the cost and they don't have the money now, right? Money pulled back. And everyone thinks that the money, let's just say this is the same graph in terms of financial income. They think that this stays like this forever, but that's not the truth. The truth is in investing, it's to avoid these, getting taken out of the game and having a reset event. Like they think humanity's had like 3 restart events, like where we've had to basically go back to the Stone Age and come back from it, right? That happens all the time in people's finances because they get overly greedy because they're not chasing that specific number like your guy is, right? So they end up chasing more for the sake of more and they put everything they have at risk. That 429 Main on Rochester is that for me, right? Had that under contract for 2.1. Rehab came back at another 2 million, right? That was going to be 4.1 that we had to personally guarantee, and anyone that we partnered with on that deal was going to have to do. And I just thought to myself, I would love to own that building, but I would hate to have to give up $4 million if it went wrong. I would hate that, right? I would hate to have to sell my house. I would hate to have to move my lifestyle way back. I would hate to have to do all these things for the pursuit of what? More cash? I mean, I'm not interested in increasing my lifestyle at this point. My lifestyle's fine, right? So I'm not going to go pursue that. If I was the guys who ultimately ended up buying that, the LaFontaine family is one of the investors in that. Yeah, right? They invested in that building and they're investors in that building and I had that money. Yeah, let's go take a little gamble on North Main, right? Because that represents a fraction of my net worth. But $4 million represents a large portion of my net worth. I don't want to take that off the table if things go wrong. Does that make sense? Okay. No credit, right? No credit card. No, and I mean this with the most amount of love possible for everybody. But when you're financing luxury on credit card, I mean, like you and I couldn't give each other a loan for the amount of interest that credit cards cost, right? I couldn't say, if you asked me for a loan, Jonathan, I couldn't even give it to you. But because it's a credit card company that has lobbyists, they somehow skirt the usury laws. I don't know how that's possible, right? And I don't understand why. Well, I do understand why that's the case. It's cash. But that doesn't make it right. So I would encourage everybody to pay that down as fast as possible. And that's the first step on any financial journey, right? And then once you have money, purchase protection, maximum disability protection, adequate life insurance, best health insurance, adequate home and property insurance, adequate insurance. I could tell you I got pulled into a class action lawsuit as a result of being in the brokerage. Well, really, Emily and I did together. Hey, who knew? Right? That was a fun Friday. Kind of ruined my weekend for sure. That class action lawsuit, and I was like, whoa, like we need to get insurance up to the hilt. Again, because I didn't understand what a class action lawsuit meant. And really it was someone calling the do not call list in the brokerage. It had nothing to do with me, right? But everyone moves into Maslow's hierarchy of needs when that stuff happens. Keller Williams blamed the franchise blamed the agent blames the franchise, right? And everyone does. You ever seen that meme of Spider-Man where everyone's pointing at each other, right? It's that, right? So you want to have enough insurance. Somebody in your company does sexual harassment. You want insurance for that. Somebody in your company does discrimination. You want insurance for that, right? Somebody in your company has wire fraud take place. You want insurance for that, right? Because these are giant safety nets where you only can fall so far. Does that make sense? So you protect what you have. Follow a budget and avoid impulse. Again, let's go move back to let's say I'm starting 300 grand in debt, right? If you follow the budget and you avoid impulse and you two are aligned, because I know your husband's in the room, you two are aligned as you're moving forward, right? Neither of you, if you're both pursuing the same mission, are going to be like, you know what? Let's go buy a $200,000 boat, right? I see I hear these stories of people like, yeah, I surprised my wife with a Lexus at Christmas. I'm like, what? If I showed up, because Renee and I are aligned, if I showed up with a Lexus at Christmas, I wouldn't make it to the day after Christmas, right? Like it would be, you'd see blood across all of the driveway, right? Right? So it just wouldn't happen, right? Because we're aligned as a result. And it causes you to chase less impulses because it's more important for you to pursue together what you're chasing than whatever that quick dopamine hit's going to get you. Does that make sense? Save up, then purchase. Don't let credit card do your saving for you, right? Just because you're financing it and it doesn't seem real and it's sitting on a credit card, but your savings account's going up, like that's a losing game, I promise.
Sometimes credit cards are good if they're giving the cash back.
But this is assuming
paying it off every month.
Right.
And you're not,
Yes, we do that.
interest, you can actually make money using
How you
it.
force it.
So there are some advantages.
No, I'm not saying don't have a credit card. I've earned over $100,000 in credit card points. I mean, legitimately, it's craziness. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is don't carry balance. Right? Don't carry balance. Buy based on need first, avoid wants and purchasing lifestyle. That's self-explanatory. We beat the dead horse on that. Think repair first, replace second, and new last. I mean, I always get crap about my car that's all busted up from people. I mean, we're just living that, man. We're living that completely. And it is a nice car. It's just 8 years old with 107,000 miles, and the things don't fold down on it, and the brakes make noises, and I just don't give a shit, man. I don't care. I go buy anything I want, and I'm just driving that bad boy around. Doesn't matter. Pay yourself first, not last. I struggle with that one, to be honest. I'm always delaying gratification. I always pay myself last. That's one that I very rarely do. Whenever we're tight in the markets on a budget, I'm like, oh, just give up my salary. I'll just take it a different month. Doesn't matter, right? Which I'll probably do this month. And then tithe, right? Always put your money towards something. Creates gratitude. All right, so this is where you're going to hear me start to preach a little bit of profit share here for those of us who are with Keller Williams. So if you have $100,000 a year passive income after taxes, all right, who here would be financially free at $100,000 in passive income? Okay, your expenses are lower than 100 grand a year. Okay, so you'd be there at this point, right, after taxes. So $1 million at a 4% return tax-free earns you $40,000 in passive income. 2.5 million at a 4% return tax-free puts you at 100,000, right? So that means in order to get to that 100,000, a lot of people get really discouraged when they look at cash flow because they realize it's about as exciting as paint drying, right? I mean, it's riveting stuff where you're like, wait a minute, I got to go and spend how much money to make $300 a month? Like, I mean, come on. When I go to Kroger, it costs more than that, right? It's really I told Emily I'm like, we're on the get rich slow team, we're on the get rich slow plan because cash flow is the get rich slow plan. It really is, right? So 2.5 million you have to have invested at a 4% return to get 100,000 a year, right? So if your annual income's 100,000 minus 30,000 in income tax, assuming a $30,000 bracket, that leaves you with 70,000 minus 30,000 to invest. That gives you 40,000 to live. 30,000 over 10 years is 300. Over 20 is 600. Over 40 is 1.2. Over 80 is 2.4. Right? So you do all that math, right? 60,000. Why are we at 60,000 for 40 years?
This isn't factoring for inflation either.
Correct.
2.5 in 20 years is one.
Now, how many people in the world do you think have 2.5 20 years from now? I mean, it's
Not a substantial amount.
not a substantial amount.
How do you say that?
You think, how many people?
With the way inflation is going, why wouldn't it?
Most
Net
people.
worth?
Most people don't even have like $800 in their bank account.
What are you saying, net worth?
I know, I never realized that, until I saw like people that.
You ever?
70%.
You wanna know?
Americans only have like
I mean,
People have a lot of net worth in their homes.
well, that's fair if they're homeowners. I agree with that because it's forced savings. But the rest of the world that aren't homeowners, man, they have a really hard time building net worth. They really do because they have no control over their own life. Every time someone wants to raise rent, I'm a landlord. Rent's due. You know, rent's due. I really don't know what they're going with the bottom of this, so we're gonna keep moving on.
We're just trying to figure out how to get that, segueing to cash flow, real estate investment.
Must be on how to get to the 4% over 100,000. Because you got to do 240,000 over 10 years to get there.
Easier with real estate than saving your.
It's 100% easier with real estate, but I think it's to bring a reality check that cash flow is tough, so you got to get intentional for it.
There's also that earned income, so if you save $30,000 a year, it's going to take you 40 years. If you only live on your earned income, only invest your earned income, you're going to do 40 years to get to that tax.
Yeah, because the 100,000 couldn't be on dividend, because it wouldn't be 30,000, and dividend doesn't get taxed at 30%. You guys understand the difference between those things? Active income gets taxed at a much higher rate than dividend income or passive income. That makes sense? It's basically double. Okay. All right, so there's two kinds of capital, and we called this the path of money for this exact slide. So a dollar comes in, right? And it could be, the dollar could be coming from a passive investment, or it could be coming from an active time for money, right? And that's what our W-2s are and our 1099s being realtors, right? A dollar comes in some way into our life, right? Now that moves into the cash flow, right? We're receiving cash, so it's into our cash flow matrix, right? We have four choices at that point. We get to spend it, we can donate it, we can save it, or we can invest it. Does anyone have another option? Every dollar that comes into our life, that we're doing one of those four things with. Can we all mutually agree on that? Okay. Should we choose to invest it, we have two options. We can lend it, or we can choose to invest it in something that we own. What would be an example of something that we own?
Real estate holdings,
Yeah.
mutual funds, stocks,
REITs, all right? The answers are on the slide.
gold, silver.
Yep, gold, silver.
Cryptocurrency.
Yep, right? Cryptos, yeah. Okay, now if we wanted to lend it, we're money markets, CDs, bonds, T-bills. That's someone else controls it. That's a very passive investment, right? If we want it to be active, we can do private lending or owner financing, right? So Glenn and I were talking about how to build out the Lake Orion office. And she's like, listen, I'm not going to be doing this 30 years from now. How do I exit this thing? As I said, one of the biggest challenges KW's had historically in a lot of market centers is, the original group that launched it's now in Florida hanging out on a beach, right? And their operating agreement doesn't have a way to clear them out in order to make opportunity for the new group. And that's one of the challenges we've had. So I told her, I'm like, if you're going to launch an office and you want young, hungry people to come in and grow this thing, they're going to be looking at you thinking, okay, you're eventually moving on. How do I get more or make room for the next group? So that was our combo on how to set up the operating agreement, right? And that's what she can do is owner finance those shares out and still be living off the cash flow if she's pursuing cash flow by selling those shares on terms. Does that make sense? Right? So she can maintain that cash flow until as long as she wants when she chose to exit and sell the shares out of that office. Does that make sense? You guys following me on that? That's an example of owner financing. What's an example of private lending? Hard money loans. Yeah. Peer-to-peer lending. What's her name talking about? What was Clarissa talking about? T-bill stacking. I don't know. T-bill ladders. I don't know, all this craziness, right? And all of these things that happen lead to financial returns. Can we all agree to that? That then go back up into what? Back into number two. What I promise you, if you sit there and you earn your income here and you allow your investments here to continue to live on the path of money, you'll look up, the first million will be the hardest million you ever make, and the second million will happen exponentially quicker because you've established the platform and the dominoes are already falling for you, that where it took me 12 years, so at 30, hit the first million in net worth. It took me another 12 months to hit the second million, right? It was like that. right? It was just exponential because we hit that bell curve that you're talking about on personal development. We hit that bell curve financially where the dominoes started falling. And we had already established a base in which it was inevitable, right? It was inevitable for that second million to happen. Does that make sense? You guys following me on this? I want you to think about this. Like, take a mental image of this in your head when you have money come into your life. What am I choosing to do with this, right? And how do I have this dollar make me another dollar? Who's heard Kevin O'Leary talk about his investments and how he refers to his money? How does he refer to it? He says it's his soldiers that he sends out to capture additional soldiers and bring them back home, right? He's like, I want to send my soldiers out, and their job is to capture additional soldiers and bring them back to me, right? That's what this is. Does that make sense? All right, I realize we're getting a little tight on time, but bear with me here. Interest rates compounded monthly. So this is if you invested $1,200 a year and then run it to the right. This is how many years you would be doing that for. And look at the returns you can get if you get higher returns over time. If you had 20% return, you could turn that 1,200 into 49 or 36 into 49, right? And look at how bell curves up. It starts to take huge chunks. Does that make sense? It's $100 invested every month over X number of years, depending on what your return is. So you put $100 every month in for 30 years, you'd have $36,000. Right? If you did that for 30 years, and if you got a 20% return, that $36,000 would be yielding $2.336 million. Right? Does that make sense? So what's did Einstein say was the eighth wonder of the world? Compounding interest. You're staring at it right now. Right? Well, it can work against you too.
That's what I'm saying. You take out 30
Yeah.
and over 30 years you pay $100,000. Doesn't make sense.
It works.
You're still not using
It works against you. Okay, so this is through 2010. All right, the U.S. small stock market return index was 12%. The S&P was 9.9. A balanced portfolio was 8.8. Right. So one of the things, this is Renee and I's financial general take on things, is we will go and maximize the stock market in terms of what will reduce our taxes at the most rate. Anything beyond that, we don't contribute towards the stock market. We take that money and put it into real estate. That makes sense? Because what we're trying to do is reduce our taxes to the level in which we can easily. Anything up and above that, I don't want it in the stock market. I want it in something I'm an expert on, and that's real estate. Does that make sense? And that's kind of and we know if we just let it ride, if you just put it in VSIX, VSIX, you can read Simple Path to Wealth if you want to understand all the logic behind this, because they get into it pretty deep. But the largest hedge fund managers in the world very rarely beat, when you consider management, what the cost of management is, very rarely beat that 9.9. So if you just put it in VSIX, which is basically betting on the entire market, you're betting on America at that point, you're going to end up with a higher return than trying to, do whatever. Now, if you consider yourself a day trader and you want to mess around, by all means, have at it because you enjoy it, right? That's what you want to do. But if you're just talking about how to maximize your money at the least amount of investment, max out. If you have a 401k match, do that. If you can contribute towards a SEP or those sort of things to reduce your taxes, a Roth, right? All those things, absolutely do that. Our take is, in all of our research, is do not go up and above that. Go and put that into something you're an industry expert and basically have legal inside trading on, which is real estate. Does that make sense?
My friends that are financial advisors have said their clients that have dollar cost average seem to make more money on the markets than people putting the big chunks at once. I mean, obviously.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. So
like the same amount every first of the month.
That's spot on. And if you read Simple Path of Wealth, they talk about that because there's something like 17 trading days that if you would have missed those 17 days over the last 13 years, you would have missed out on a large portion of your return. So basically, if you're out of the game on one of those 17 days, you didn't see this big spike, right? And again, read Simple Path of Wealth if you want to understand more about that, because they do hit on exactly that, and those guys are spot on. Okay, and I'm going to hit this last one. I realized I took a little long up front, but you guys have all the material. The 10 ways to keep people from being a millionaire. Oh, God, there's so much good stuff in here, but the need to visit their capital. I promise you, I see people do this all the time. They need to go visit their capital on a consistent basis, meaning when it lives on the spreadsheet, it doesn't feel real to them. So they got to sell an asset. They got to do all these things. I highly encourage just set it and forget it and let it ride, right? You and I were talking about this, James, right? If we would have kept all of our investments that we've ever owned in terms of real estate and then did a cash out refinance when rates were sub 3 on investment loans, we'd be living on millions of dollars at that point of money that we are not being taxed on. And in fact, is reducing our taxes because now our money that the government perceives as income is a fraction. Because you don't get, when you do a cash out refinance with real estate, you don't get taxed on that because it's not income, it's a loan, right? Well, if the loan's at, I have a loan right now at 2.67 or 2.675%. What did the CPI number come back as inflation last week? I think it's 3.1. My interest rate's here, inflation's here, right? I'm doing okay.
If you have that money invested, even in the money market now, you're probably looking at 5%.
Well, over time, you're looking at 9.9. Yeah, right? So you could go choose to reinvest that. A lot of people do that. That's investing on margin, right? But they're using real estate as their margin, essentially their lever. Okay. Lack of trust in paper wealth. They think paper assets wealth feels false. They don't trust the asset to hold its value, so they sell whenever they think timing's right versus buy right and hold forever. And this has been, I want to just spend a second on this one. This is the biggest financial mistake I've personally made, Renee and I have personally made, is we sold the investments that we would be salivating and just, I mean, I'd run through this office screaming at the top of my lungs if I could go buy them today, right? And I was talking to my friend Lucas, who's our regional director, and I'm like, yeah, I'm thinking about selling this. And he got this from Ben. He just parroted it. But he's like, well, if you could find that same house for that same price today, would you buy it? And I'm like, yeah, of course. He's like, then why are you selling what you're looking for? And I'm like, where were you 2 years ago where I sold my 4 rentals in Warren that are worth so much more money now? My 7 units in Cincinnati, and then the house I had in Vegas and Phoenix. Why didn't you tell me that then? He's like, yeah, I didn't know it then. I heard it from Ben like 2 years ago. It would be such a difference in my life. I mean, it would and it wouldn't. It would just be that much more financially free. Does that make sense? Well, yeah, but yeah, good tenants makes a big difference, but a good management company usually leads to good tenants. And of course, there's an exception, but man, I'll tell you, Epic Property Management does a great job. The lack of proper balance between paper wealth and cash flow. This is huge. Don't highlight this one. They get caught up in building wealth on paper and ignored the counterbalance with cash flow. Remember, just about most stocks, I mean, very little stocks provide dividends at this point, and dividends are the only way to cash flow with stocks. Everyone hear me on that? Dividends is the only way to cash flow on stocks, right? The urge to be liquid. They think cash is real and everything else isn't as real. So they have the consistent need to convert all assets to cash at some point. That was me. I was going to time the market, and I was bringing cash in. That's why I sold those, right? I was an idiot. I wish I could be switching seats with you and take a time machine backwards. They overuse or improper use of debt. The weight of debt causes them to want to pay it off without sufficient cash flow. They see selling assets as the only means to pay off debt. Well, that means you're lacking in some other point where you're not living in abundance with money, so you feel the need to sell that asset that you were dreaming of when you first bought it. I was talking to Emily about this on 1031 exchanges, and I'm not crapping on 1031 exchanges, but what if you just made more money so you didn't have to? Right? What if your dad went and just bought that bigger building because he had the cash, right? And 1031s can be great. There's definitely a mechanism for them, and I'm not saying not. I'm just saying, man, imagine a world in which if we lived in abundance with money, that we didn't have to sell one asset to buy another. We could just buy them both, right? The urge to, this one, mega agents fall, especially people in sales. We all fall into this. For me, it was the urge for a short period of time. I never ended up doing it, but the urge to live high on the hog before their cash flow can support them that way. The high cost of living causes them the need to be liquid regularly to cash in tomorrow's future earnings potential so they can live high today. That one's huge. That one's absolutely huge. Take $10, put it on 30-year AM chart at today's interest rate. I saw my client yesterday close to 8.8% on an investment loan, and run that over 30 years and look at what that money is. It's enormous, right? And just in parting, because I know we got to go, this is Gary's financial philosophy. Before he increases his lifestyle, he takes his cash flow up and then has his lifestyle meet, and then takes his cash flow up and then has his lifestyle meet. It's very financially chicken, and it's worked out pretty good for him, right? So if he's going to go buy a lake house, for instance, he's going to go buy enough assets that then finance the lake house. He doesn't buy the lake house and then figure out where to find the assets. Does that make sense? Okay. For those of us who employ people, the lack of seeing people as a real investment. If you get a chance to read, God, what book is that in? Anyways, if you invest in the right real estate, you'll see it, or the right people, you'll get a 10-to-1 return, sometimes higher. If you invest in real estate, you still get a return, but you don't get a return like you do people. A lot of people think of the people that work with them as an expense, when in reality, they're truly an investment. You're investing in that person, and if you can help that person realize their potential, you'll get exponential returns forever. Then second, if you help that person continue down, if you know what their life mission is, you know what their motivational interview looks like from the CV process, you know what their vision board is, and they continue to check things off on their vision board, who leaves something that everybody's achieving everything they dream of at? No one leaves that, right? I'm doing so good here, I'm going somewhere else, right? That makes no sense. If you want to get what you want, how do you do that? If you help everyone else get what they want, you'll get what you want, right? They don't have a written down wealth plan that they trust. Katie, that's your guy. He's got one that he trusts. They spend more money than they make, or they spend all that they make. We see people this all the time. Social media has only made this so much worse. They don't study money or the rules of investing. You guys are the exception to this. They don't realize that just like anything else, money has its own rules. Underestimate the rules isn't complicated, but it does take a commitment and an effort to learn.